I want you to look at your smartphone. Now, imagine a notification popping up right now that promises you financial freedom, total liberty, and a life of luxury. But there is a catch. You have to be in a specific city within 24 hours to claim it. In today's documentary, we are looking at the great crypto migration of 2026. This wasn't a glitch, it was a gamble. It was the day a mysterious tech billionaire promised to launch a new, decentralized world state in the heart of Southeast Asia, drawing 100,000 coders, influencers, and day traders to the Philippines. It was a clash between the digital world and the analog reality, between Ethereum and the peso, between the metaverse and Metro Manila. Before we watch the bubble burst, tell me in the comments, what is the craziest thing you have ever done for money? Drop your location below, and let's dive into the day Silicon Valley crashed into the Pearl of the Orient. The event was triggered not by a server error, but by a tweet. At exactly 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, the elusive creator of Pacifica, the world's most hyped cryptocurrency, broke a 3-year silence. The message was simple. The physical capital of Pacifica will be established in Manila tomorrow. The first 100,000 citizens to arrive and check in via geolocator will receive 10,000 coins. At the current market rate, that was worth $500,000. The internet didn't just break, it melted. From the co-working spaces of San Francisco to the gaming cafes of Seoul and the lofts of Berlin, a collective madness took hold. This was the golden ticket, the ultimate airdrop. Flights to Manila were not discounted. They were scalped at 10 times the price. Private jets were chartered by collectives of college dropouts. The digital nomads of Bali packed their bags in a frenzy. The gold rush was on, and the mine was located in the sweltering chaos of the Philippines. Julian Thorne, a 6-year-old app developer from Austin, Texas, was arguably the face of this demographic. He lived his entire life online, investing every cent he had into digital assets, owning nothing physical but a backpack and a high-end laptop. When he saw the tweet, he didn't think, he reacted. He drained his emergency savings to buy a seat on a cargo plane, rerouted from Guam. Julian represented a generation that believed reality was optional, that value was code, and that the Philippines was just a backdrop for his inevitable rise to wealth. He boarded the plane wearing a hoodie, noise-canceling headphones, and smart glasses, surrounded by hundreds of men who looked exactly like him. They weren't fleeing the cold, they were chasing the hype. They sat in the dark cargo hold, faces illuminated by the blue light of trading charts, convinced they were the pioneers of a new world order, oblivious to the humidity waiting to greet them. The arrival at Ninoy Aquino International Airport was a scene of dystopian absurdity. Usually, the airport is filled with returning overseas Filipino workers carrying massive boxes of chocolate and spam, balikbayan boxes. Today, it was flooded with young men carrying nothing but Pelican cases and VR headsets. They didn't walk with the disciplined march of soldiers. They walked with the frantic, distracted energy of people looking for a Wi-Fi signal. As they spilled out of the terminals, they didn't look at the sky or the city. They looked at their phones, desperately trying to check in to the geolocator app. The local cellular networks, battered by the sudden influx of 100,000 data-hungry devices, instantly throttled. The spinning wheel of death appeared on thousands of screens simultaneously. The first wave of panic wasn't about safety or food, it was about bandwidth. The digital pilgrims had arrived, but the digital door was jammed. The Philippines is a country that runs on island time and face-to-face interaction. The Pacifica horde ran on nanosecond transactions and smart contracts. The collision was immediate. Julian tried to book a grab car, but the app was down. He tried to offer a taxi driver 0.5 Ethereum for a ride to Bonifacio Global City, BGC. The driver, a middle-aged man named Kuya Ray, looked at the QR code on Julian's phone, laughed, and said, "Cash only, "Sir, peso." Julian didn't have cash. None of them did. They were post-fiat, believing physical money was a relic of the past. Suddenly, 100,000 millionaires on paper found themselves destitute on the curb. They stood there, sweating in their designer hoodies, waving digital wallets at confused drivers who just wanted $20 for gas. It was the first crack in their reality. In the real world, you cannot eat code. The congestion that followed wasn't just traffic. It was a clash of operating systems. The tech bros, frustrated by the lack of rides, decided to disrupt the transport system. They rented every available electric scooter, bicycle, and pedicab in the city. A swarm of electric scooters, ridden by reckless foreigners filming TikToks, descended onto EDSA, the city's notoriously dangerous highway. They weaved between massive buses and jeepneys, treating the chaotic Manila traffic like a video game level. The Filipino bus drivers, who navigate these roads with a mix of aggression and prayer, were horrified. The honking was deafening. Julian, riding a pink child's bicycle he had bought from a street vendor for a smartwatch, found himself sandwiched between a cement truck and a commuter van. The exhaust fumes hit him, choking him. For the first time in years, he wasn't watching a simulation. He was in physical danger, and there was no respawn button. The destination for everyone was Bonifacio Global City, BGC, the modern, glittering financial district that looks like a tropical Singapore. The Pacifica app indicated the check-in point was a specific high-rise tower. By noon, the streets of BGC were gridlocked with humanity. The perfectly manicured lawns were trampled. The high-end cafes ran out of oat milk and cold brew within an hour. Julian managed to squeeze into a Starbucks, desperate for an outlet to charge his dying phone. The scene inside was manic. People were shouting about gas fees and blockchain latency. They were rude to the baristas, demanding faster service, treating the Filipino staff like NPCs, non-player characters, in their quest. The staff, however, maintained their composure with heroic patience, serving iced lattes with a smile to men who were on the verge of a nervous breakdown over a loading bar. Then, at 2 p.m., the unthinkable happened. The rug pull. The Pacifica app on 100,000 phones simultaneously flashed a message. Project terminated. Thanks for the liquidity. The geolocation check-in button disappeared. The trading charts plummeted to 0 in seconds. The billionaire founder deleted his Twitter account. It was a scam, a massive orchestrated pump and dump scheme. Silence rippled through the crowd in BGC, followed by a collective scream of anguish. Julian stared at his phone. His portfolio, which showed a value of $500,000 just minutes ago, now showed $0. He wasn't just broke. He was stranded. He had spent his last actual dollars on the plane ticket. He was 8,000 miles from home, with no money, no hotel, and a battery at 4%. The digital bubble had burst, dropping them hard onto the concrete of Manila. The crypto refugees crisis began instantly. The hotels in BGC, realizing the credit cards on file were declining en masse, began locking guests out of their rooms. The arrogant swagger of the tech bros vanished, replaced by the terrified look of lost children. They gathered in parks, sitting on their pelican cases, heads in their hands. The contrast was stark. The glittering glass towers of the financial district looming over a refugee camp of young men in Yeezys and Supreme t-shirts. Julian sat on a curb, hungry and dehydrated. A street vendor approached him, selling fish balls. Julian looked at the food greasy, street-level sustenance and realized he had no way to pay for it. He held up his $2,000 laptop. "Trade?" he asked weakly. The vendor shook his head. "Too heavy," the vendor joked. But then, seeing the desperation in Julian's eyes, he handed him a stick of fish balls for free. "Eat. You look pale." As night fell, the reality of their situation set in. The heat didn't dissipate. It just became heavy and sticky. The mosquitoes arrived. The smart city of BGC offered no shelter for those without money. The crowd began to disperse, drifting towards the cheaper, grittier neighborhoods of Makati and Taguig. Julian found himself wandering into a Times Barangay Times local neighborhood, a maze of narrow alleys, neon lights, and video machines. Here, the pretension of Silicon Valley didn't exist. People sat outside their homes, drinking beer and laughing. Julian was terrified. He had been taught that these places were dangerous, but as he walked, nobody mugged him. Instead, they pointed and giggled. "Hey Joe, you lost?" A group of men drinking gin shouted. They weren't hostile, they were amused. The invaders had lost their power. They were just tall, sweaty curiosities. The pawnshops of Metro Manila saw the greatest influx of high-tech inventory in history. By day 2, the windows of Tambunting and Cebuana Luia, local pawnshops, were stacked with MacBooks, iPads, drones, and DSLR cameras. The exchange rate was brutal. A $3,000 laptop went for $200 in cash. It was a fire sale of the digital age. Julian pawned his VR headset. He got enough pesos to buy a prepaid SIM card, a bottle of water, and a cheap room in a hostel with no air conditioning. Lying on the thin mattress, listening to the roar of tricycles outside, Julian felt a strange sensation. He was disconnected. No crypto, no Twitter, no Discord notifications. For the first time in 10 years, his mind was quiet. The silence was terrifying, but also, strangely, relieving. He was forced to exist in the physical present. The hunger drove them to the Times Carinderias, Times local eateries. These were places the tech bros would have mocked on Yelp just days ago. Metal pots filled with mystery stews, eaten with plastic spoons or bare hands. Julian sat at a metal table, staring at a plate of Times, Sisig Times, sizzling pork face and ears. A local construction worker named Dante sat opposite him. Dante saw Julian staring at the food. "Mix the egg," Dante instructed in broken English, mimicking the motion. Julian obeyed. He took a bite. The fat, the chili, the citrus, it exploded in his mouth. It was visceral, real, and delicious. He ate ravenously. Dante bought him a beer. "You crypto guy?" Dante asked. Julian nodded, ashamed. "Stupid." Dante laughed, clapping him on the back. Money is paper, or gold, not computer magic. It was a lesson in economics. Julian had paid $50,000 to learn. The Filipinos, realizing these foreigners were essentially helpless children, did what they do best. They adopted them. It became a societal project. The Titazants of Manila took charge. They couldn't stand seeing skinny boys crying on sidewalks. They opened their homes. Julian was taken in by Kuya Ray, the taxi driver he had tried to pay with Ethereum earlier. Ray lived in a small, concrete house with his wife and 3 kids. It was cramped, hot, and loud. But it was full of life. Ray's wife, heavy with maternal authority, took Julian's laundry. "You smell like airplane," she scolded. Julian sat at their dinner table, eating rice with his hands, watching Filipino soap operas. He learned that in this house, wealth wasn't measured in Bitcoin, but in how much food you could put on the table for guests. The tech bros couldn't pay rent, so they started to trade their skills. It was a bizarre return to a service economy. High-level blockchain architects were seen fixing the Wi-Fi routers of internet cafes for a plate of chicken. UX designers were helping sari-sari store owners organize their inventory spreadsheets. Julian helped Ray's daughter with her computer science homework. He explained coding logic to a 1-2-year-old girl using pebbles on the floor. He realized that for the last 5 years, he had been building apps that solved imaginary problems for rich people. Now, he was fixing a slow laptop so a girl could attend school. The utility of his skills felt different here, smaller, but significantly more real. The climax of the week was the internet blackout. A massive tropical thunderstorm knocked out the power in the district where Julian was staying. The darkness was absolute. No fans, no lights, no data. In San Francisco, this would have been a catastrophe. Here, it was Tuesday. The neighborhood poured out onto the street. Candles were lit. Guitars appeared. The lack of electricity was solved by human connection. Julian sat on the curb with Ray and his neighbors. They shared a bottle of Times Emperador, Times brandy. Someone started singing. Julian, usually paralyzed by social anxiety without a screen to hide behind, found himself humming along. He looked up. Without the light pollution of the city, he could see the moon clearly. He wasn't checking the price of Pacifica. He was just breathing. The U.S. Embassy and European consulates eventually organized relief flights. They treated it like a natural disaster evacuation, but for victims of their own greed. The buses arrived to collect the citizens. Julian packed his meager belongings. His backpack was much lighter now, devoid of gadgets. He said goodbye to Ray and his family. He tried to give Ray the last of his pawnshop money. Ray refused. "Keep it," Ray said. "Buy a real ticket next time." Julian hugged the man. It was awkward, sweaty, and genuine. He realized he had arrived thinking he was a king coming to claim his kingdom, and he was leaving as a beggar who had been fed by the people he intended to rule. However, not everyone left. About 5,000 of the tech workers stayed. They had lost their savings, but they had found something else, a problem-rich environment. They realized the Philippines didn't need another crypto coin. It needed traffic solutions, flood warning systems, and logistics apps. They formed a new kind of expat community, not the digital nomads working for US clients by the pool, but analog integrators. Julian was one of them. He didn't get on the bus. He stayed in Ray's guest room. He started a small consultancy helping local businesses digitize their records. He stopped wearing hoodies and started wearing loose linen shirts. He stopped watching charts and started watching the weather. The Silicon tsunami left a strange scar on Manila. The luxury condos in BGC had a brief vacancy crisis, but the local economy in the neighborhoods boomed with the influx of pawned electronics. Every kid in Ray's barangay now had a high-end tablet for school, bought for pennies on the dollar. The Pacifica scam became a national joke, a meme used to describe anything that promised too much and delivered nothing. "Don't pull a Pacifica on me" became slang for "don't scam me." The city absorbed the blow, took the loot, and kept moving. Manila is a grinder. It chews up pretension and spits out reality. The most profound change, however, was in the mindset of the men who went through it. They had been part of the cult of the individual, believing they didn't need society, just servers. Manila taught them that when the power goes out, you need neighbors. It broke their ego. Julian looked different now. He was tanned, slightly thinner, and his eyes were present. He wasn't scanning the room for opportunity. He was engaging with it. He had learned the concept of times, Bayanihan times, the Filipino spirit of communal unity. It was a blockchain of human souls, and unlike crypto, it was immutable and unhackable. Years later, the great crypto crash of Manila is studied in economics classes as a prime example of mass hysteria. But in the streets of Makati, it's remembered differently. It's the week the aliens landed, realized their space money was worthless, and had to learn how to be human beings. It was the week Silicon Valley got humbled by the third world. The tech bros came to disrupt the Philippines, but the Philippines disrupted them. They came for the future, but they were forced to live in the present. Julian sits in a Jeepney now, clutching the metal rail as the vehicle careens down Taft Avenue. He pays his fare passing the coins down the line of passengers to the driver. "Bayad po," he says perfectly. He doesn't have millions. He doesn't have a startup unicorn. But he has a date tonight with a girl he met at the market. And he has a meeting tomorrow to install a solar grid for a local school. He looks out the window at the chaotic, messy, beautiful city. He smiles. He lost a fortune to find a life. The scammer who started it all was eventually caught on a yacht in the Mediterranean. He is currently serving 200 years in prison. But, in a strange way, Julian is grateful to him. The lie brought him to the truth. The promise of a fake paradise led him to a real one. Not a paradise of leisure and riches, but a paradise of connection, struggle, and vitality. The glitch wasn't in the system. The glitch was in the way they were living, and Manila fixed it. The legacy of the event is visible in small pockets of the city. There are cafes now that accept Julian coins, not a crypto, but literal wooden tokens Julian carved for Ray's kids to use as chores currency. It's a local joke. The Pacifica Tower in BGC was renamed The Folly by locals. It stands as a monument to hubris. But around its base, the street vendors still sell fish balls, feeding the office workers, the dreamers, and the occasional lost tourist who forgot to bring cash. Sometimes, late at night, Julian opens his old laptop. He looks at the code he used to worship. It looks sterile to him now, cold. He closes it and walks out onto the balcony. The air is thick with the smell of rain and exhaust. He hears a rooster crowing at 2 a.m., the eternal soundtrack of the Philippines. He takes a deep breath. He isn't a user anymore. He isn't an admin. He is a resident, and that title carries more weight than any verified checkmark ever could. The story of the tech invasion is a reminder that technology is a tool, not a world. We build digital castles to escape the messiness of life, but the messiness is where the flavor is. The Philippines didn't change for the tech bros. It just waited for them to break, and then it put them back together. It showed them that efficiency is overrated and resilience is everything. So, the next time you see a get-rich-quick scheme or a promise of a digital utopia, remember the boys in the hoodies sweating on the tarmac at NAIA. Remember the day the internet died and real life began. Remember that the most valuable currency isn't mined by a GPU. It's earned by breaking bread or times Sisig times with a stranger when you have nothing left to offer but your hunger. As the sun sets over Manila Bay, turning the sky into a burning canvas of red and gold, Julian takes a photo. He doesn't post it. He doesn't mint it as an NFT. He just looks at it, keeps it for himself, and puts his phone in his pocket. The battery is low, and he doesn't care. If you are watching this on a $2,000 phone, feeling empty, maybe it's time to log off. Maybe it's time to get lost. You don't need a scam to do it. You just need a ticket and the willingness to let go of the handlebars. The world is waiting, and it doesn't take crypto. We often think the future is about moving away from humanity into the cloud, into the algorithm. But the Silicon Tsunami proved that when the chips are down, we run back to the tribe. We run back to the fire. We run back to each other. The Philippines was the fire that warmed the cold hearts of the digital age. Julian Thorne is no longer a name on a watch list or a leaderboard. He is just Julian. And in a world desperate to be someone else, somewhere else, being just Julian, right here, is the ultimate success story. Thanks for watching this documentary on the day the bubble burst in paradise. If you enjoyed this story of redemption and roast pork, hit that like button. Subscribe for more tales of culture clashes and human absurdity. And tell me, could you survive a week without your phone in a city of 12 million people? Until next time, keep your wallet closed and your eyes open. Peace.